How's it going, guys? My name is Thomas Bresch. I'm the creator of a game called Pinstripe. I'm also working on a game called Once Upon a Coma. I love making games, but what I love even more is you. I love you so much because you guys send me a ton of emails. I get a gazillion emails every morning, not really, but a lot of emails in the morning with questions about entrepreneurship, about indie game industry, about quitting your job, about going full-time, making games, being creative, and following your dreams. The sad thing is I don't have a lot of time to answer the questions, but today I'm going to try and answer 3. And these are 3 of my favorite questions. They're questions that are, honestly, they're really, really important. They're really, really important if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be a game developer, or just a creative person full-time. How do you come up with interesting game ideas? I have some good ideas for games, but the storylines are way too short to be a complete game. I love this question. I love this question because it's kind of missing an important fact about storytelling. A good story is not really a plot. A good story is about characters and character arcs. So let's say you have a really cool idea about, let's come up with something, a werewolf who likes to drive Jeep Cherokees around. I'm looking at my Jeep Cherokee out the window. He likes to drive Jeep Cherokees around, and he runs over his wife, werewolf. That's the plot. It ends with him running over his wife. Well, this is the dumb story. Well, it can be a great story, and it can be a small story, seemingly a small story, but what makes it a beautiful story is we could focus in on the character of this werewolf. And so what I like to do with my stories is I have a small little plot idea. So for example, a minister who goes to hell. That's my first game, Pinstripe. And it did really well on Steam, and it's doing good on Switch, and I'm happy with it, I'm proud of it. But what that story is about, the plot is about a minister who goes to hell. And we could say, why does a minister go to hell? Well, the plot answer is to find his daughter, rescue her. That's the plot. But the real plot, the thematic plot, the abstract one, the emotional one that's about Teddy, the character, is to find redemption from something that's been bothering him, that's been eating him alive from the inside. And spoilers, it's about something he did that was really, really bad. And the reason he goes to hell is not to rescue his daughter. The reason he goes to hell is to rescue himself, to find redemption. So the storyline, it should be about your characters. So no matter how small your story is, especially if it's a narrative-focused game, make it about the characters. So really think about some things that your characters aren't telling the player, or that we're not telling the player about the characters. What are some things about your character? Maybe you don't even know about the characters. You should know your characters intimately. This is going to sound weird, but 2 days ago, I wept about a character in one of my games that I'm working on, in Once Upon a Coma. I wept. I really did cry. You should feel the torment of your character before telling the player about the torment of your character. It doesn't have to be torment, but it needs to be real. It needs to be honest. You need to tell the truth. See, the thing is that when we tell the truth in our games, in our stories, and in our artwork, when we tell the truth, suddenly it becomes meaty, and there's much more there than we thought. So really start questioning whether you're telling the truth with your story, because no storyline is too short if there's honesty there. Another quick point that I wanted to give here is that if you feel like your story isn't fully there yet in your game, one of the tricks that I like to do is to, instead of tell story to the player, I actually like the player to tell the story to themselves. And I learned this from Z, who is the owner of Serenity Forge. His name is Z, that's a Z. At least that's what we call him. And he said to me last week, he said, Thomas, don't really tell the player anymore, because I've been thinking, how do I flesh out this story more for Once Upon a Coma? And he said, don't really tell the player things. Just have them ask questions. So basically what you do is you present things to the player that make them question things and wonder things and pushes them forward. This is especially important in games because you want the player to continue to work. Because a lot of games it's just working, right? It's working through puzzles, it's working, and sometimes it's farming, like farming and killing enemies and collecting things to be able to advance to the next level. If you're going to ask your player to work, you want them to know what they're working for, and that is answers to questions that you present. So even though a story can be really small, if you present questions, and you see this in Agatha Christie stories all the time, it's a really simple solution, really simple plot. There's a murder and this person did it. But when you present 10, 20 questions to the player, when they work for the answers to those questions, it makes the story feel so much more meaty, especially when you're being honest and telling the truth about your characters. Hope that makes sense. Shadon, I mean, I could go on and on and on about how to come up with interesting game ideas, but ultimately, hopefully I answered part of your question, which was how do you flesh out a story that's maybe small? All right, the last question is from that's a mouthful, an anonymous emailer. But let's go ahead and just name this person. Let's name him Clarence Orthodontia. Before I answer your question, I want to thank this video's sponsor. So guys, one of the biggest challenges of going full-time indie is figuring out where to focus your energy. If you're somebody who doesn't want to write your own music and you don't want to look around for composers to write music for your games, Skaya offers an incredible portfolio of music on the Unity Asset Store. They've got kids music, they've got post-apocalyptic music, they've got horror music, and they've got one of my favorite fantasy packs available on their store. I mean, take a look at this fantasy music here. It kind of reminds me of Breath of the Wild and also Hollow Knight. Really pretty. See, the thing is you want your music to fit your game's atmosphere, and I think Skya really does a good job of this. So they've got relaxing music, they've got energetic music. Really across the board, Skya's portfolio is amazing. So take a look at the link in the description, and if Skya's portfolio is something for you. Clarence Orthodontia writes, I'd like to know more of the entrepreneurship side of indie game development. Things like how you start a business, how the revenue is generated in the indie game world, sales, royalties. Do you find your business viable in a way that is financially sound? How do you come up with, this is kind of a big email. How do you do marketing, and what is your business structure like? For example, net income, how much do you allocate back to your company? And how much do you use for personal use? Wow, Clarence, this is a very intense email, but I will answer it. I'll answer it as best I can. Let's start from the bottom here. You said, Thomas, how much do you allocate to your company for personal use? I pay myself twice a month, just like a normal business. I have payroll, but it operates a little bit differently. It's for tax purposes. But overall, yeah, I've got a payroll. It's not even, I can't tell you how much it is. I'm sorry. It's not six figures, I promise you. Okay, so I make a small income that's middle class. My wife also works, but I make a small income. Now my company has capital and revenue, and there's a whole other side of things with my company. But the best thing you can do is separate yourself out from your company, because when your family is in your company and it's all personal, it's one, dangerous for liability reasons and legal reasons, so separate it out as an LLC. But it also helps your brain, because when you're constantly thinking about how much money you're making, as opposed to how much your company is making, which is like this separate entity, it can get really stressful. It can get really messy. So overall, yeah, Clarence, you need to separate out your business and actually operate like a business. A lot of indie game developers I know just live in this. Their company is them, and they are their company, and that, to me, that's a recipe for like mental illness, honestly, like depression and anxiety. I wouldn't be able to handle that. So I like to separate them out. The next thing you said is how is this is a good question. How is revenue generated in the indie game world with like game sales and royalties? 10 years ago, I thought you sell a game. You make a game and you sell it. That's how you make money in the indie game world. Now that is true. That's where the majority of my revenue comes from, to a degree. I mean, there's also like crowdfunding, which ultimately is game sales. And that's arguable. I get that. Feel free to debate me in the comments, but Kickstarter and sales of a game, let's just combine those together and call that game sales. So yeah, you can make game sales. So every month I get a paycheck from various publishers that I work with. Those publishers are paying me based on what they've received, obviously from Steam or from consoles like Switch or PS4 or Xbox. And then you're also, making money with Humble Bundle, or you're doing big sales like daily deals with Steam, those kind of things. So you're making money from your games. Now, you should know that the majority of revenue that comes in from games is sales. It's sales. So when you run a sale, that's when you make the most money. When a sale isn't running, it's like a drip. It's a small drip, but you really look for the game sales and the daily deals and the Humble Bundles. Those are the big revenue chunks that come in for games. Now, believe it or not, something that's really helped my mental health in running a company and running a game studio is having residual income come in that's not from game sales. One of my goals in 2019 is to build residual income. I'm trying to think about this, and also my nose itches and it's driving me crazy. Sorry. One of my goals in 2019 is to not lean on game sales. Some of you have said, Thomas, why are you running a YouTube channel? Can't you just make enough money from game sales? The answer is yes, I could. I could run a game studio and be fine. But I like the feeling of having multiple plates spinning so that if one crashes, I always have backup plans. If one crashes, I've still got another one. So what I like to do is I like to have residual income come in from places like YouTube and Patreon. And by the way, if you want to support on Patreon, that would mean a lot. There's a link in the description. But YouTube and Patreon are a great way to bring in residual income. And then game sales are a great way to bring in upfront big chunks of cash that can pay for, a quarter to a year's work. Okay? So there's residual income, and then there's also big chunks of cash that can come in. Now, these big chunks of cash, my nose itches. These big chunks of cash can come in from a lot of different places. They can come in from advances from publishers. They can come in from advances from companies. Guys, there's a lot of companies right now, storefronts that are coming out. And these you can land exclusive deals. And so there's ways to make money by just signing with some new storefront that's coming out. Epic Games is not the only one. Signing with those storefronts, and they actually offer big chunks of cash. Hasn't happened to me yet, and I can't speak to it right now, but I can say that they're there. And so not only can you get advances from publishers, you can also get advances from these new storefronts that are coming out, and they're just looking to pad their catalog. So I would recommend, if you guys have a game, reaching out to some of these new storefronts that are coming out and seeing if they're interested in your game. But yeah, I hope I answered your question, Clarence Orthodontia. In short, is there ever a point where you should just stop trying to get full-time indie status? He goes on to say that he's been working a long time making games, and every time he publishes one game, it's better than the last, but it's not really paying off. So he just wants to know, is there ever a point where, he can go full-time and I guess maybe even self-actualize? Ultimately says, am I spending too much time chasing a dream? So honestly, Gavin, I have some questions for you, buddy, as opposed to maybe questions for me. And hopefully these questions will answer your question. First question for you is, do you enjoy making games? See, for me, sometimes I don't enjoy making games, and I think about maybe doing something else. And then I wonder, is it worth it if I'm not even enjoying it? So let's pretend you do enjoy making games. And also, let's say you don't have dependents, meaning a family, a wife and kids or something, and it's just you. Well, part of me feels like your question is not fully relevant to what you're doing. Let me try and explain here. are enjoying doing it and you don't really have any financial burdens, then the question doesn't matter because you should love it and you should enjoy it. Now let's get more practical. If you do enjoy it, but you do have some financial burdens and you can't go full-time indie because you have to work a full-time job, then the answer is yes. Honestly, I'm going to be really honest here because I practiced answering this question before I started recording, and I need to be honest though. And I think my previous answer wasn't really honest. Yeah, if you're good enough, you'll reach financial freedom, or AKA full-time indie status, being able to pay yourself a salary full-time if you're good enough. And I know that that's a weird thing to say, so let me talk about what good enough is. What good enough is you're someone who's always thinking about how to market yourself and market your games. I kind of lay awake at night thinking about how to increase revenue, increase profits, and pay the bills for my family. Now, I know a lot of you don't like hearing that. You don't like hearing about making games being about money. But the thing is if you're going to make games, you have to make money eventually. And so I'll just say this. The way to get to full-time indie status is being smart with your strategies, your business strategies. So I'll just say this, Gavin, you really, if you want to get to the full-time indie status, you need to be thinking about revenue opportunities often. You need to be planning revenue opportunities often, because you can make a great game. You can make an incredible game. But most of the time, even though you have an incredible game, if you don't execute properly with marketing and with business strategies, you might miss the mark. You probably will miss the mark, and your game won't bring in any revenue, or at least enough revenue for you to go full-time. So I've actually made a video on how to make money as an indie game developer, but there's a few opportunities available. There's Kickstarter, there's Patreon, there's YouTube, which is one of the reasons why I do YouTube, is it helps supplement income. There's plenty of income, not plenty, but there's income that I've saved in my company. But what YouTube does is it allows me to feel the freedom of making money month to month, as opposed to feeling like I'm always burning through cash. So ultimately you said, are you spending too much time chasing a dream? Well, how much is the dream worth it? What am I trying to say? How much is the dream worth to you, Gavin? How much is the dream worth? Do you actually enjoy working on games? If you don't enjoy working on games, then yeah, you're wasting your time chasing a dream, because ultimately it's not really a dream. But if you love making games, if you want to tell stories, if you want to say something, then no, you're not wasting your time. You're doing great. Just don't bear the burden of thinking that money is a bad thing, that pursuing financial opportunity, whether it's in publishers, whether it's in Kickstarter, whether it's in Patreon, whether it's YouTube or social media, ways to bring in revenue for your studio. Don't think of those as bad things, because those are some of the ways that you bring in revenue for your company. I've pursued financial opportunity in a lot of areas that I didn't know about 10 years ago. And I don't feel bad about it, because I know that I need to do it. I've got a family. I've got a studio to pay for. I've got overhead costs. And in order to pursue my dream and make things full-time, make beautiful pieces of artwork full-time, I've got to be smart. I've got to be a businessman. Gavin, really great question, buddy. Guys, this was really fun. I love answering your questions. I feel like a therapist. If you guys enjoy my therapy, please hit the like button or the dislike button if you thought my therapy was inadequate and irresponsibly given. Comment below and I'll try and answer your questions. Hit the subscribe button, and guys, honestly, Patreon means a lot to me. So if you guys want to support, that would be awesome. Thanks again. Talk to you later, guys. Bye. That was for the person who told me to stop kissing the mic.